Rabbi Sai, my whole perspective on this issue was really completely revolutionary, underwent a revolutionary change, because a couple of months I saw on social media Sephardi Rav was talking about the importance of buying Israeli produce when you live in Chutz La'aretz. And he said that, what are people worried about? Trumas and Maasros. You don't have to take Trumas and Maasros from Peiros, from produce that's exported to Chutz La'aretz from Eretz Yisrael. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, what in the world is he talking about? I never heard such a halacha. We always know that, from my yeshiva days, the attitude was, if you have to look for the produce that you buy in the market, because if it says a product of Israel, you should avoid it because of problems of Trumas and Maasros. And you always feel that tinge of guilt because you're supporting BDS. The BDSers are not going to buy it, and the Jews are not going to buy it. So who's going to end up buying the produce from Eretz Yisrael that's exported, that's supporting farmers and supporting the economy, the agriculture in the land of Israel? But what about Trumas and Maasros? It's a serious issue. The latest issue that Mizrahi put out on for Tu B'Shvat has an article from Rav Rimon in which he discusses the issue of the possibility that produce that's exported to Eretz Yisrael may be exempt from Trumas and Maasros. And this sort of, again, blows me away, because I'd never heard this before, but the truth is it's a Mefurish Rambam. And we're going to take a look at the Rambam tonight. And then we're going to look at where we go with the Rambam. Okay, so let's start. The Mishnah, the source text of the Rambam is a Mishnah in Maseches Chala, which has to do with not specifically Trumas and Maasros, but with the law of tithing Chala, which is when you have dough, you have the mitzvah of taking a portion of that dough and giving it to the Kohen. It's a form of tithe. So Peiros Chutz La'aretz shenichnusu la'aretz chayovim b'chala. The first part of the Mishnah is that if you have produce from outside of Israel that's imported into Israel, that dough, even if the dough was imported as dough, you need to take challah from it. Okay? Even though normally dough from Chutz La'aretz is patur from challah, but once it gets imported into Eretz Yisrael, it becomes now liable for the mitzvah of hafrashas challah. Yatzu mikan l'sham, but if it leaves from here to there, what does here to there mean? What does here to there mean? From Eretz Yisrael, where the Mishnah is being written, from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz, if it gets exported to Chutz La'aretz, Rabbi Eliezer mechayev Rabbi Akiva poter. Rabbi Eliezer says you're obligated in the mitzvah of challah, and Rabbi Akiva says you're patur from the mitzvah of challah. And as we'll see, all of the Rishonim learn that there's no difference, or at least for the Rishonim that I've seen, there's no difference in the mitzvah between the mitzvah of challah and Trumas and Maasros in this regard. So if you take a look at the Rambam's Perush on that Mishnah, the Rambam writes, Omar Hashem asher ani mevi eschem shama. And this is really the Rambam elaborating on a Gemara Yerushalmi that I don't have copied for you because the Yerushalmi is quite lengthy. But based on the Gemara, the Torah says that you shall tithe from the produce of the land where I am bringing you there, to the land to which I am bringing you. Shama atem chayavim ve'en atem chayavim b'chutz. So we learn from there that you're only chayav in Eretz Yisrael, and you're patur from Trumas and Maasros in Chutz La'aretz. Now, what does that mean exactly? That's still ambiguous. But the Rambam says that Rabbi Eliezer Omer ba'och lechem yilechem ha'aretz bein ba'aretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. That he looks at the part of the pasuk that says when you eat from the produce of the land. He says that's an unconditional statement. Regardless of whether you're eating that produce in Eretz Yisrael or in Chutz La'aretz, you are always obligated in Truma and Meiser. And that's why Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're chayiv. But the halacha ka Rabbi Akiva. But the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, who says that in the Gemara in Maseches Chala in Yerushalmi, that as long as the produce of Eretz Yisrael leaves Eretz Yisrael, it is now exempt from Chala and Trumas and Maasros, the produce. Now, there's a lot of question marks here. A lot of question marks. I see the furrow in your brow, Simi.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I always thought there was a different halacha for challah than there was for pira, so that's...
No, there's no differentiation in the Gemara itself. But let's take a look how the Rambam applies this in Hilchos Trumos. Let's look in Hilchos Trumos first. So the Rambam in Hilchos Trumos says, this is in the first chapter, 22nd halacha, Peiros Eretz Yisrael sheyatzu chutz la'aretz peturin min hachala umin hatrumos umin hamaisros. Produce that's exported out of Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz is exempt from chala, from truma, and from meiser. See, he says that beferish, right?
Yeah.
Shenamar asher ani mevi eschem shama, because the Torah places the obligation when I bring you to that land, and from that you learn that shama atem chayavim b'chutz la'aretz peturim. You're chayav there, but you're pater if the produce is brought to Chutz La'aretz. V'im yatzu l'Surya chayavim midivreihem. And if the produce goes to Syria, which is an adjunct territory to Eretz Yisrael, to Syria, so then midrabanan you're chayav. V'chein peiros chutz la'aretz shenichnasu la'aretz chayavim b'chala shenemar shama. And if you have peiros of chutz la'aretz, conversely, that's imported into Eretz Yisrael, so that produce, once it comes into Eretz Yisrael, is liable for chala, as it says, shama, as it says there. That once you bring it into Eretz Yisrael, then it's also going to be chayav. Shama atem chayavim bein beperos aretz bein beperos chutz la'aretz. And you're obligated no matter what. And then the Rambam adds, however, v'im nikvu l'maiser biyad Yisrael achar shenichnusu la'aretz chayavim b'maisros midivreihem. That if, so one second. There, the Rambam only says chala. Okay? The Rambam only says chala. He says that in a situation where you have dough that is brought in from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, so since the wheat has already been nikva, right? It's already been nikva in Chutz La'aretz, but nevertheless, since it's brought into Eretz Yisrael as dough, you have to take challah from it. But as far as trumas and maisros, he says it depends. Im nikva'u lemaiser biyad Yisrael achar shenichnusu la'aretz chayovin b'maisros midivreihem. But trumas and maisros, you're not going to be chayav for peiros that grow in Chutz La'aretz and are imported into Eretz Yisrael, unless they're finishing, they're kavia lemaiser, which is what we call miruach hakri, where they're finished in a pile. So in that situation, if that finishing, what you do is you harvest wheat stalks, you winnow and you thresh, and you get finished piles of grain. Once you have a finished pile of grain, that's called finished. It's nikva lemaiser. It's now ready to be tithed. So if that finishing takes place in Eretz Yisrael, so then you're chayav to take trumas and maestros from the stuff that's imported from Chutz La'aretz, but only midirabanan. If the kviya l'maiser, if it's finished product that is imported to Eretz Yisrael, even midirabanan, you don't have to take trumas and maestros from wheat that's imported into Eretz Yisrael. But if stalks are brought into Eretz Yisrael and then they're threshed and winnowed in Eretz Yisrael, you only have to do it midirabanan, because it looks like produce that grew in Eretz Yisrael. So let's just review.
Why doesn't it work the other way around?
Why there's not an equivalency. We'll see. The Rambam says across the board, produce that's exported to Chutz La'aretz from Eretz Yisrael, pater, is not subject to trumas and maestros or challah. Produce from Chutz La'aretz that is imported into Eretz Yisrael is obligated in challah, but trumas and maestros is exempt, except if it was finished in Eretz Yisrael, then it's chayiv midirabanan, but only midirabanan. So far, that's all we know from the Rambam. All we know. And it's not symmetrical, as you can see. Export laws and import laws are not symmetrical for the Rambam. Let's go ahead.
the Patur it's Patur de Rabbanan or Patur de Raisa?
The Rambam doesn't qualify it. The Rambam says patur. When any posek says patur, it means
right.
patur even midrabanan. But let's see.
Right, because just, I mean...
I'll answer your question even more clearly if we take a look at the Ravid. Let's take a look at the Ravid. V'li nira shelo nechlaku Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Akiva bazeh ela b'chiyuv Torah u'v'petur Torah. The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam, and he says the machlokus between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, in Maseches Chala, is only regarding the biblical obligation to tithe. The Rabbi Eliezer azil basar gemar peri, the Rabbi Akiva azil basar makom kvius lemaiser. Rabbi Eliezer says, take a look at where the fruit finished growing. If it finished growing in Eretz Yisrael, so even though it gets exported afterwards, you're obligated to consider it fruit of Eretz Yisrael, and you have to take Trumas and Maisos Midoraisa. And Rabbi Akiva says you don't take a look at where the fruit finished growing, you take a look at where the fruit was processed, its finished process. And therefore, if you take stalks of wheat and you export the stalks to Chutz La'aretz, then Rabbi Akiva would say, since it wasn't finished until it got to Chutz La'aretz, Rabbi Akiva says you're patur. Now the Rambam said nothing of this. But then the Ravid goes even further. Dahainu miruch aval midurabanan miha afal pi sheyatzu Chutz La'aretz v'nimrachu chayavin midurabanan mishum delo grimi pero shinaru mitzrayim va'amanu malav. But, says the Ravid, if you have stalks of wheat that are exported to Chutz La'aretz, at least midurabanan Rabbi Akiva would agree that you have to take Trumas and Maisros. And my proof is that we know that produce that grows in areas that are adjacent to Eretz Yisrael, that are not part of Kedushas Haaretz, are nonetheless midurabanan chayv and Trumas and Maisros. So certainly, produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael and is exported should be subject to Trumas and Maisros. And then he gives a further argument. Va'od shelo yomer ra'inu peros haaretz shenecholim b'tivlam u'misheinu moda b'zetoya. And then the second argument the Ravid gives is that it's Ma'arasayim. If people see that produce from Eretz Yisrael is exported and they see me eating it without taking Trumas and Maisros, people will come to think that it's okay to eat tevel without tithing it. And the Ravid finishes by saying, Umi she'eno moda bazet to'eh. If you don't agree with this, you're making a mistake. Big machlokus between the Rambam and the Ravid. Did the Ravid answer your question, Laser?
Well, I was going to ask that. Yeah. In other words, this is only talking about it. I know there will always remain a D'Rabbanan in effect.
Yes, according to the Ravid. But the Rambam, he's arguing with the Rambam. You understand that? According to the Rambam, it's clear from the Ravid itself. Then when the Rambam says it's patur from Trumas and Maisos, even with the Rabbanan it's patur.
But it's interesting. I mean, it's just going a step further. In the Shulchan Aruch, I mean, we again, not to go too further, but challah everybody takes in Chutz La'aretz. I mean, here's the question. In Chutz La'aretz, we take challah.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
And the Gemara says because you're going to forget, so you have to continue to do it. Right? So if you take challah in Chutz La'aretz, then why should it be worse than if you bring it into Eretz Yisrael, if something that begins in Eretz Yisrael and goes out?
Why? Okay, let's see.
Right.
Let's see.
No, so here in Chutz La'aretz you already have an obligation. Something which begins in Eretz Yisrael and then you export it to should be less than that. Perhaps.
Listen, if I'm not the one that's doing the argument to make between challah and Trumas and Maisos, I can make a very simple argument. When I'm making the dough is the miruach hakri that makes it chayiv in challah. So if I'm the one who's making the dough, so it could be that Chazal obligated me because I created the gemar malacha. But if I buy a bag of finished wheat that had its miruach hakri somewhere else, and I'm not the one who's doing the gemar, then maybe I could be patur even midirabanan. That's the argument to make. Okay? So let's take a look now at, for brevity, we're going to take a look at the Mishnah Lamelech. And he understands the Rambam as really being somewhat more in sync with the Ravid, because you saw that there was this distinction that the Ravid was making. He said, First of all, everyone holds that midrabanan, peros that's exported, is chayiv in trumas and maisos. But the thing that he said before then is that it's an interesting machlokus between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer as to, and the only machlokus between them is what do you go according to determine whether it's chayiv in truma and maiser vis-a-vis Eretz Yisrael produce that's exported. Do you look at where it grew, or do you look at where it had its gemar, where it had its completion made into a pile of grain? Rabbi Eliezer says you look at where it grew. If it grew in Eretz Yisrael, then it's chayiv. And Rabbi Akiva says you look at the gemar, and so therefore if it was exported as stalks of wheat, and it was only stockpiled when you got to Chutz La'aretz, it's considered Chutz La'aretz fixed, and therefore it's pater. Now, according to this, according to what the Ravid has just told us, then even according to Rabbi Akiva, if the miruach, if the stockpiling took place in Eretz Yisrael before it was exported, then even Rabbi Akiva would agree that midiorais it's chayiv in trumas and maisers, correct? That's the interpretation of the Ravid. We don't have any indication that the Rambam would agree with that. If anything, the Rambam disagrees with that. But let's see. The Mishnah Lamelech is going to read the Ravid into the Rambam. Okay, so it comes along the Mishnah Lamelech and he says, source number 4, Din zed de peros Eretz Yisrael sheyatzu chutz la'aretz hu machlokes Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Akiva reish perek beis dechala. This is a machlokes, this whole halacha that the Rambam is citing of exported produce, that nan v'sheyatzu mikan l'sham, Rabbi Eliezer mechayiv v'Rabbi Akiva poter v'halacha k'Rabbi Akiva. So we paskin like Rabbi Akiva who says that it's poter. U'machlokes zu hu dafka k'shahachiyuv haya b'chutz la'aretz. Now look at the language of the Mishnah Melech. He says that the only time Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva disagree is when the completion of the produce took place in Chutz La'aretz, just like the Ravid had said. Kegon shegilgel ha'isa umireach hakri b'chutz la'aretz. Bazehu depater Rabbi Akiva mishum da'azal basar kaviyos l'maiser. Only if the stalks were finished in Chutz La'aretz, or the dough was finished in Chutz La'aretz, would Rabbi Akiva say you're pater from challah and you're pater from trumas and maisers. Aval im gilgel ha'isa umireach hakri be'eretz Yisrael. But let's say you made the dough in Eretz Yisrael, or you processed the grain in Eretz Yisrael, and then you exported it, like you work for Tenuva, or you work for Osem, and you're taking finished grain and you're exporting it. So bazeh pshita da aliba de Rabbi Akiva af sheyatzu chutz la'aretz chayavin bechala uvemaiser min haTorah. Then it's obvious that it's chayav in trumas and maisros midioraisa even after it's exported. And what's his argument? Da hachiyav shenischayavu biyosam ba'aretz lo paka minayhu. He says because after all, if it was finished in Eretz Yisrael, then at that point it becomes chayiv in trumas and maisros.
Right.
That can't fly away. That can't be removed just because you put it on a plane. So the svara of Alechem Mishnah is very sound. His argument is that once it became chayiv in trumas and maisros in Eretz Yisrael, then exporting it does not remove that chiyuv. You with me? You with us? Good.
But that would be totally in a different machlokes, which is whether we say that yesh lahapkiya of the maestros, let's say with a different context, you sell it to a goy. You live in Eretz Yisrael, you sell it to a goy.
Mm-hmm.
Did the maestros lose its status? So that's a machlokes, right?
Ravaji is going to bring that issue of selling it to a goy. So bear with us. Good.
So according to the Mishnah Melech, fruit and vegetables are always going to be chayav because they are kaveya.
They had their gemar in Eretz Yisrael. Absolutely. If you paskin like the Mishnah Lamelech's understanding of the Rambam, you don't even have to come on to the Ravid. Right. But you just have to go like the Mishnah Lamelech in the Rambam itself. All produce that's exported to Chutz La'aretz is chayav in trumas and maisros, even midioraisa.
Right.
So far, so good. Let's go. Sefer HaChinuch, source number 5. He talks about the mitzvah of truma. V'noheg isser, or he actually talks about the isser of teva, which is the prohibition of untithed produce. He says, isser zeh shel tevel b'chol Yisrael b'zochar u'nekevos v'afilu b'kohanim u'levim. This prohibition of eating untithed produce applies to all Jews, males and females, even Kohanim and Leviim. In other words, don't think that just because a Kohen and a Levi are entitled to the tithes, they can eat untithed produce. No, it doesn't work that way. Even if it's their own produce, they have to first tithe it, and only then can they eat it. And furthermore, it applies in all places, which means any produce of Eretz Yisrael may not be eaten that if it's been untithed, even if that produce is exported out of Israel to Chutz La'aretz. Ad kan ha-sefer ha-chinuch. Okay? Comes along the Minchas Chinuch. And he writes as follows. Minchas Chinuch is written centuries after the Sefer. Sefer HaChinuch is a Rishon. Minchas Chinuch is written by Rav Babad in the 18th, 19th century. So it's much, much later. Okay? And he writes as follows. V'chei noeg ha'isser b'chol makom nira midivrei harav ha'mechaber degam chiyu v'ika kemo b'chol ha'mitzvos. That not only is there an isser of tevel, but there's an obligation to tithe. There's a positive commandment. Shekosav di isuro nohig b'chol makom b'chol makom. It applies in every place, and if I violate it, I incur a penalty. That's the chiyuv, right? V'tzarich iyan das harav ha'mechaber. Dehalo mevur b'mishnah b'perik beis dechala deperos eretz yisrael sheyotzu l'chutz la'aretz Rabbi Eliezer mechayev Rabbi Akiva poter v'alacha k'Rabbi Akiva neged Rabbi Eliezer. I don't understand. The Sefer HaChinuch seems to be paskening against the Mishnah in Maseches Chala. Because the Machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, we always pasken like Rabbi Akiva against Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Akiva says that if it's exported, it's pater from Trumas and Maasros. V'chein Pirush HaRambam, Perak Aleph Mehilchos Truma Halacha Chaf Bezal, Peres Eretz, and then he quotes the Rambam. And then he says on the fourth line, and he says, and the Rambam also says you're pater if it's exported. Va'ayin bekesef Mishnah kosav sherabenu sover detrumosu ma'isro shava lechala be'inyan zeh. And it's clear that the Rambam holds there's no difference halachically in the laws of tithing between chala and truma and ma'aser. V'halimut shekosav rabenu hu b'Yerushalmi. V'imkein heich kosav harav ha'machaber b'pshitus. V'alperos Eretz Yisrael, turn the page. Chayovin b'chol makom. If the Rambam is basing himself on the Mishnah, how can the Sefer HaChinuch write contrary to the Rambam, which is contrary, therefore, to the Mishnah? V'tzarech lomar kisvaras ha-Mishnah l'melech sham. And you have to conclude that the Chinuch holds like the Mishnah l'melech that we just saw. De pluktas Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Akiva sham eno ela im nigmar melachdan b'chutz la'aretz. What did the Mishnah Lamelech write? He said that the only time Rabbi Akiva is lenient by exported produce is if it had its gemar in Chutz La'aretz. Avol im nisgalgal v'nimrach be'eretz Yisrael Rabbi Akiva moida dechayev. But if it was finished, if it had its gemar in Eretz Yisrael before it was exported, then even Rabbi Akiva is moida that it's chayev. V'das ha-Mishnah Lamelech muvu'arin sham b'hasagas harayvit shekosav sham be'emtza hadibur de Rabbi Akiva sover de'azlinin basar kvius ha-maiser de'haini miruch ad kan. And what is the Mishnah Lamelech based on? It's based on his application of the svara of the Ravid and applying that to the Rambam. Im kain kavonas harav ha-mechaber gam kain kain. And therefore that's what the Chinuch holds. However, says the Minchas Chinuch in conclusion, Umidiktuk l'shono shekasa v'asur lechol hatevel shel peros Eretz Yisrael nira dahainu denitfelu be'Eretz Yisrael. You can look at the language of the Sefer HaChinuch and actually infer that, which means that it was tevel in Eretz Yisrael. It had its gemar in Eretz Yisrael, and that's why it's chayiv even after it's exported. Comes along the Minchas Chinuch in his own opinion and says, Avol li tzarich iyan divrei ha-Mishnah Lamelech. But I have a problem with the Mishnah Lamelech. What's my problem? Minole lahamis kain bedas harambam kivin sheinu mefurish b'dvara va'ad rabbi yesh hochacha da rabbim svirle b'chol inyan pater b'chutz la'aretz. And the Minchas Chinuch goes on. He says, where does the Mishnah Lamelech get the right to superimpose the svara of the Ravid onto the Rambam if the Rambam never said that. If anything, the language of the Rambam is categorical, that across the board, any produce that's exported to Chutz La'aretz is patur from Trumas and Maasros, nikuda, period. There is no qualification where did its gemar take place. And the Minchas Chinuch leaves off disagreeing with the Mishnah Lamelech. Just want you to know that. Okay? So, based on a simple, straightforward reading of the Rambam holds it doesn't matter where the gemar took place. If it's exported, it's patur from Trumas and Maasros. Now we're left with a question. The question, of course, is...
Against the Sefer HaChinuch too. He disagrees with the
Well,
Sefer
it
HaChinuch.
could be the Sefer HaChinuch holds like the Ravid. I don't know how he holds, or yeah, the Sefer HaChinuch could very well hold like the Ravid. That's not a problem. Or with all due respect, you can paskin like the Ravid, but if you're paskining like the Rambam, I don't see where the Mishnah Melech can read that into the Rambam.
Just that usually the Sefer HaChinuch paskins usually goes like the Rambam. Usually.
Okay, but all right, so maybe this is an exception. Bach, Yoredeya. Oh, sorry. First we're going to see the Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber. What do you think the Mechaber is going to paskin? Chayev or Pater? Going to paskin like the Rambam. And as Rav Ovadia says, even though many times the Mechaber is machmir like the Ravid in a machlokes, sometimes when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, the Rambam is the posek of Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam, because the people of Eretz Yisrael accepted the Rambam as their posek. Okay, so take a look at what he says. Peiros Eretz Yisrael sheyatzu chutz la'aretz peturim mitrumas u'maisros. Nikuda. Pater. No qualification. V'im yatzu l'Surya chayavin. But if they go to, not totally chutz la'aretz, but if they go just to Syria, to the environs of Eretz Yisrael, the adjacent territories, so then they're chayav. Uperos chutz la'aretz shenichnasu la'aretz la'aretz chayavim inikvu l'maiser achar shenichnasu la'aretz. And like he's quoting the Rambam that midirabanan, if it had kvius, if it had a gemar in Eretz Yisrael, imported produce, it's chayav midivreim, chayav midirabanan. Take a look at the Bach. Uma shekasav im nikvu u'lemaiser. Nira de bereisha biyatzu me Eretz Yisrael l'chutz la'aretz. Svirale laharambam she'ein lechalek bein nikvu u'lemaiser be'eretz Yisrael bein lo nikvu u'la'olam piturin. It seems from the language of the Rambam, says the Bach, that it makes no difference where the gemar of this Israeli produce took place. Whether it took place in Eretz Yisrael or whether it took place in Chutz La'aretz, you are pater once it gets exported. Right? Midrasha dekra, shenemar ani mevi eschem shama. Shama atem chayavim, b'chutz la'aretz peturin. You're only chayav if the produce remains in Eretz Yisrael. But once the produce leaves Eretz Yisrael, there's no longer an obligation to tithe. Aval peros chutz la'aretz shenichnasu la'aretz dechayavin, din hu she'enan chayavin ela b'nikvu l'maiser b'yad Yisrael achar shenichnasu la'aretz, and then he just tells us the flip side, that imported produce from Chutz La'aretz is only chayiv midirabanan if it's finished, if it has its gemar in Eretz Yisrael. The midioraisa b'chol inyan pater kevin shegadlu b'Chutz La'aretz, because really midioraisa, anything that grows in Chutz La'aretz will always be pater from tithing. Okay, etc., etc. Finish. We're not going to see the rest of the Bach. Shailas Utshuvas Maharsham, Rav Shwadron, a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer in the 19th century. He writes the following tshuva, source number 9. La'arav ha'ma'or ha'goyla kapel tzvi, the Av Beis of Salitza be Moldova. Okay? Moldavia. Okay? So, Michtavo higiani. I got your letter. V'alderech ha'she'ila b'din etrogim hamuva'im me'eretz Yisrael al Chag HaSukkot. Okay, so you have a European shaila of the 19th century. They're exporting esrogim from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. And there's a whole shaila about tithing esrogim. But if it's tevel, you're not allowed to, I don't think you're allowed to do the mitzvah with a tevel esrog. Uvechol teva yesh tzetel meharabanim disham shehufrash aleim trumas umaisras. I think the halacha is that the esrog has to be edible in order for you to be able to do the mitzvah. I don't recall from where, but that's the premise of this tshuva. And therefore, on there's a tzetel, there's a piece of paper that's glued to the crates. On each one of the crates, it says that trumas and maasros have been taken from these esrogim. Ve'etzel socher echad lo haya tzetel shel hechsher hanal. But in one of the crates of a different exporter, they couldn't find the tzetel. They couldn't. There was no stamp or no paper that stamped that it was. Yeah. Upasak Rebbe Umori the dinam ke'esrog shel tevel, and so you, the Rav of Moldavia, you paskind that they have a din of tevel, and you can't use them for the mitzvah, or at least you can't eat them. V'gam efshar lahafrish mizeh al zeh. And furthermore, to compound the complication, you can't say, okay, so let's tithe one esrog for all of these other esrogim that are in that crate that's unmarked. The dil mektsasan me'usar and mektsasan ena me'usar and v'yafrish mipater alachiv. Because who knows? Maybe some of them were tithed. Just because it didn't have the tzettel doesn't mean that it could be they just forgot to put the tzettel on that crate. So maybe some of them are tithed and some of them are not tithed. And if you take produce that's tithed, you can't use that as tithe material for stuff that's teva. And therefore you're hak tzaras. V'imkein harei I efshar litakein. You can't fix it. V'gam I efshar lahafrish b'machshava. Kol shekein mikol esrog dimkein dino kechaser. Kol shekein v'herich b'pilpul. And what do you want to say? You want to say each esrog should have a little piece of it that's truma and meiser for the rest of the esrog. Then you can't use it for the mitzvah. Because then it's like a missing, like even if you don't cut out the piece, but once you mark that piece as being usher for achila, so it's now a deficient esrog for use of the mitzvah, and you can't use a deficient esrog. So you felt that there was no other option. You have to discard all of these esrogim. They cannot be used. So comes along Rav Shwadron, and he wants to paskin otherwise. And he says, Hinei la'aniyas daiti yesh loden bazeh kamatz dadim lo hakel. And he has a number of arguments. I'm just pulling out an extract from the tshuva. Ach yesh ladun. Daha bepero shel Eretz Yisrael sheyatzu l'chutz la'aretz kaimelan karebi Akiva de piturin mitrumas u'maisras. I mean, after all, one of the arguments is that any produce that's exported out of Eretz Yisrael is pater from truma and meiser. Kimavor b'simin shin lamed aleph sif yud beis. Da'af da hamishna lamelech perak aleph mitrumas hela dezed daf gibel nismarchu be'eretz Yisrael aval nismarchu be'eretz Yisrael gili dechiv l'kuli al mechayav ayin sham. Is what are you going to do? You're going to tell me the Mishnah Lamelech, who said that that's only when they only had their gemar in Chutz La'aretz, but esrogim that are harvested and put in a crate, they had their gemar in Eretz Yisrael, so they should be chayiv in trumas and maasros. Milvad dibis sefer minchas chinuch al chinuch mitzvah reish pei dalad hisig ala Mishnah Lamelech behela delushitas haram gam bechol b'chi hagavna pitur mayin sham ba'oirech. He says, in addition to the fact that the Minchas Chinuch disagrees with the Mishnah Lamelech and demonstrates from the language of the Rambam that the Mishnah Lamelech is incorrect. V'cheinu lahedja b'bach yoredeya simin shin lamed aleph sif lamed zayin b'sofa b'das harambam. And the Bach says the same thing, that the Mishnah Lamelech is mistaken. Af gam yesh lomer de davka hecha de nismarech be'eretz Yisrael adaita shiyiyya be'eretz Yisrael. But I want to add another argument in our case of the esrogim. And what is my argument? Even if you're going to take the side of the Mishnah Lamelech, but my feeling is that in this case you could still be mekel. You know why? Because this produce, from the time that it was grown, was earmarked for export. And so from the very inception of its growth, it was intended not to be consumed in Eretz Yisrael. These esrogim. Aval imitchila nismarchu adaita lahotziam lechutz la'aretz, Yesh lomar dilakule alma peturim. But if the gemar takes place with the intent at the time of the gemar to export this produce, then I hold that even the Mishnah Melech would hold that it's patur from Truma and Meiser.
So it's totally machshava?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things are totally in machshava.
Yeah,
But it was grown in Eretz Yisrael.
right.
It's
I mean,
grown and finished. Now you say, well,
it happens
I had a
automatically. when it's
machshava, I had a
finished.
havamina, it's going to go like...
There's Xeris HaKasav, it says Shama. You're only chayiv in produce of Eretz Yisrael if you're planning to eat it in Eretz Yisrael. But if you're not planning to eat it in Eretz Yisrael, you're planning for export, then everyone would hold that it's patur from Trumas and Meiser. This does not have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, or at least it has the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, but it doesn't have the chiyuv of Truma and Meiser.
Because the mitzvah of giving it, of tithing it and giving it to the kohanim, signing the issues.
Only if you're keeping that produce in Eretz Yisrael.
So that would be the thing. So if one's making a whole batch and you're only going to decide after you've made the batch what's going to go where, that when you'd have a problem.
Could be. It could be if the Gemar is done generically, and then afterwards maybe Rav Shwadron would have more reason to be machmir. But he's making a fair assumption that when you harvest, let's say, a whole orchard, you earmark the entire orchard for export. This patch of the orchard is going to go to Poland, and that's going to go to Hungary, and that's going to go to the U.S., right? I mean, that's generally, we can assume that's probably the way they do it, right?
So it's not when you plant, it's not when you harvest, it's when you're ready to export.
It's when you do when you make a stockpile of the produce, preparing it for shipping it off. That's the moment. That's the moment of Gemar.
So not when it's growing, not when it's when at the end.
The Gemar, right?
Shulchan Aruch and the Bach don't make that to you, right? They just say, Shulchan Aruch just says,
Shulchan Aruch and the Bach don't make this qualification. They say even if the Gemar was generic, doesn't matter. Once it's shipped out of Eretz Yisrael, whatever previous chiyuv or whatever previous tevel status was on it magically disappears. We don't understand how that happens. But at least the Maharsham says, okay, maybe the Mishnah Melech is right, you can't go that far. But at least agree to me that if it was labeled for export from the time that it had even before it had its Gemar, then it never acquires the status of tevel. Okay. Uchahigavna kasva ataisus be'erchin divrei maskal heinu migrusheim lemisterin kaimi vim tomer manaf gamina im nistru kevin shed hayu mikafos choma miikara dehat. Right. He brings a raya from Bate Ore Choma. There's a Tosfos in Erchin that says that the Gemara over there in Erchin says that if a city was earmarked for its walls demolition, then it no longer has the status of Bate Ore Choma. Even if the wall is still standing, but if it was tagged for demolition, that they're going to take down the wall, so then the real estate in that walled city has no longer the status of Bate Ore Choma. And Tosfos explicitly asks the question. He says, what difference does it make if afterwards it's demolished? But Kevin Shahayu Mukafos Choma Mi'ikara, he says, even if a city previously had a wall and it doesn't now, it still has the status of Bate Ore Choma. He says, Inami kid Rabbi Eliezer v'shayni hacha kevin shem ru'uyos shelo yiyahei lahem choma lo toy lahem kedushas choma shahya kodim lachein v'chulei ayin sham. And Tosfos says that one answer could be is that since they were earmarked initially for demolition, so then from that time that they were earmarked for demolition, it no longer has the status of Bate Ore Choma. Okay, so I just want to, anyway, that's the sushtel, that's the comparison, is that once you earmark something for export, from that moment it's not going to be subject to the laws of Tevel and Trumas and Maestros, and therefore the argument could be made that all of those esrogim, even the ones that don't have the tzettel on them, says the Maharsham, should be patur from Truma and Meiser. Okay? Comes along the Chazon Ish. So, up until now, we've seen Machmir, Mishnah Lamelech, Mekel, Shulchan Aruch, Bach, basing themselves on the Rambam, Maharsham. No, Ravid's Machmir. Totally Machmir. Comes along the Chazon Ish. And We'll analyze the Chazon Ish's approach in a minute, but let's first see what he says. Upeiros hamuvoyin b'chutz la'aretz me'eretz Yisrael les dina v'daina dehein chayovin v'i efshar lahakel mishum svek sveka. If you have produce that's exported from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, no one disagrees. Les dina v'dayana. There is neither rule nor ruler, neither judgment or judge, who would ever even dare suggest that it's parter from Trumas and Maasros. Everyone agrees that it's chayiv in Trumas and Maasros. Did the Chazon Ish perhaps forget a Rambam? Did he forget a Minchas Chinuch? Did he forget a Bach? Unlikely. Don't give me a svek sveka, you have a double suffix to be lenient. Maybe the produce was grown by a Gentile, in which case it's parter from Trumas and Maasros. This produce that was exported to Chutz La'aretz. And maybe a Jew already tithed it before it got to Chutz La'aretz. This elo chashiv svek sveka, the suffix asrino lav sveka hu dekvar gazru lav chachamim shalo letzarfu lesvek sveka chmoshe kasafti le'el simin ches sifkat and ches. The rabbis already said that unless you know for certain that it was tithed, you can't rely on the possibility that it was tithed.
Especially not svek sveka. Svek sveka builds one on the other. These are two separate svekas that go the other. Okay. Right?
You learned Shach and Siman Kuf Yud? Is that you're getting all the... All right, good. Va'afim neima.
36.
I'm 36.
Va'afim neima. Delo kimlon in rov ame haaretz o rov ma'asrin babi safik shel chaver. He says, and even if we don't really know what the majority is, maybe even the majority of ame haaretz tithe, and therefore it's not just a suffix, but it's a rov. You can be somech on the fact that the majority of people tithe before exporting. Mikol makom nira dezeh bichlal gezeres demai, but nevertheless it still has to at least have the status of demai. V'halo amru dehalo kech min hatagar b'chol makom demai afagav the suffix michutz la'aretz suffix meretz Yisrael mechaver v'i amei haaretz hayurov b'yamim harishanim anu lo adifi minan. Right, uboshen anu lomar deha ma'asrin miuta lididan. So he basically makes the argument that you can't take this out of the realm of demai, which is we're not sure if it was tithed or not, and therefore you have to lechumra tithe it. Then he take a look at the bracket and he says, "V'shamati mitzadedin lemiftar mishum peros sheyatzu lechutz la'aretz peturin." I have heard that there are those, doesn't even mention them by name, doesn't mention the Bach, doesn't mention the Minchas Chinuch. There are those who would like to give arguments to be lenient because it's produce exported out of Eretz Yisrael. V'zeh eino klum, but that's nonsense. Shaharei anu noagin heter beperos chutz la'aretz shenichnasu la'aretz achar gemar melachton. He says because we have a minhag that if peros of chutz la'aretz come in from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael, even after they were finished in Chutz La'aretz, we still paskin that you should be machmir and tithe them, which is not something that we've seen anyone say. V'arei anu machriim bazeh shelo ne'emar din peros Chutz La'aretz shenichnas la'aretz ela b'nismarech ba'aretz v'hu adin ibcha. V'alo adover pasha b'pi tlasa chamorei olam harayvid v'hakesef mishnah v'hamishnah lamelech. And he says, and if you take a look at the three great stringent ones, who are the Ravid, the Kesef Mishnah, the Mishnah Lamelech, all of them come out that you have to be machmir, not like the Rambam says. And then he says a couple lines later, V'yesh bodim, which is a disparaging statement to say that there are those who make up an idea. Shahamimareach almanas lahotzi lechutz la'aretz patur. That as long as your intent at the time of the gemar is to export it, then you're exempt. V'yischayv lefizeh shahamagalgel lahotzi lechutz la'aretz patur v'hagilgul b'chutz la'aretz almanas lahachnis la'aretz chayv v'kol zeh Torah chadasha. And it would turn out that according to this, that if you finish a dough in Eretz Yisrael with the intent on exporting that dough, you're patur from challah and trumas and maasros. But our minhag is that any produce that's imported into Eretz Yisrael is chayiv in Trumas and Maasros, and that can't be. So the Chazon Ish says that for the sake of consistency, if we are so machmir that anything that we import from Chutz La'aretz we tithe, then surely anything that we export from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz must be tithed. Upetur Chutz La'aretz she'amru chachamim hainu mishum demaisa hachiyav hanaisa b'chutz La'aretz ena mechayeves lo miruach v'lo gilgul v'lo mishum she'ochlen b'chutz La'aretz. He says the only petur is because the gemar takes place in Chutz La'aretz. But if the gemar took place in Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't matter where you're going to eat it. You're chayiv in Trumas and Maasros, and that's it. Ve'ein lanu elama shenemar b'gemara uposkim, and the Chazon Ish completely steamrolls over the Bach, over the Maharsham. Okay?
I was going to say, how do you just ignore the Shulchan Aruch?
Okay. Now, someone asked me, how could he ignore the Shulchan Aruch? And so, I just want to point out, you have to appreciate that the Chazon Ish, and again, this is commentary and this is purely conjecture. I could be totally wrong, and I'll readily admit that I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But the Chazon Ish is living in a time which is very precarious for Yahadus in Eretz Yisrael. There is a concerted effort in the 1950s to try and eliminate agricultural halacha. And the Chazon Ish may feel he needs to stake a claim. He needs to come down hard on the side of Trumas and Maasros for everything. Because if we don't,
Fighting it back.
the thread is going to unravel and I'm just going to lose everything. And so I don't know if that's true or not, but I just want to point out that you can see the fact that he speaks with such harsh language against the Gedolei Olam that come before him and he doesn't even mention them by name. I think there's a little bit of polemics here, if you don't mind my saying so. Okay.
How else do you understand it otherwise?
Okay, I don't know. Now, Rav Shol Yisraeli, who was a big posek in Bnei Brak, yes?
I don't really understand his logic when he's saying if you're going to be machmir in importing and we're going to make sure that it's tevel or whatever it is, then definitely when we export it's going to be. It just seems the other way around. Obviously when you import, it's going to be tevel because it's Eretz Yisrael.
When you import, when you're bringing produce from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael,
then definitely you're going to make it tevel because...
No, the argument is the opposite. If it grows outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's no argument to make. The Chazon Ish went so far as to say that our minhag, basically saying what's going on in Eretz Yisrael in his time is that even if it's finished in Chutz La'aretz, when we get finished grain and we bring it into Eretz Yisrael, we still tithe it. He says, so if we're so machmir to go above and beyond the halachic requirement for that, then surely produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael, and it's finished in Eretz Yisrael, surely that should be liable for Trumas and Maasros. That's his argument. Now, Rav Shol Yisraeli questions the Chazon Ish. He feels that the Chazon Ish should not have treated all of those shitas that we brought to say potter when it's being exported so lightly. And he writes, if you want to really understand the Bach, if you go down on the first column, 5 lines from the bottom, he says, if we want to think about what the din of peros of Eretz Yisrael that are exported to Chutz La'aretz, why does the Bach say that it's potter from Trumas and Maasros once it's exported? He says, Ein perusho she'al yedei hayetzia nifka mimenu shem iser teva. You don't say that, the pshat is not that once it gets on the plane and flies across the border of Eretz Yisrael, it leaves its status of tevel. It was tevel 5 seconds ago, flies across the border and is not tevel. That's not the way it works, says Rav Yisraeli. The Pashat Hadover Gam L'Da'ato She'Tfua Zu Im Tachzor V'Tikanes La'aretz Yihiyeh Alav Isser Tevel Kamo Shahayta Me'ikara. Because obviously, if you would fly outside of Eretz Yisrael and then fly back in, the produce would still have the status of tevel. Ela yitachen hadavar l'dei azu shemi'ikara ein chalot tevel ela legabe hane'echal ba'aretz. De klape chutz la'aretz me'ikara lo chal chiyuv. He says, similar to what the Maharsham says, that anything that is intended for eating in Chutz La'aretz never acquires the status of Tevel. And it sounds like he's saying like the Maharsham. Now, he does end up by saying that you should be machmir like the Ravid nonetheless, and you should tithe at least midirabanan. But Me'ikar Hadin, according to the Rambam, it's pater even midirabanan. Let's take a look. We only have time to take some choice sampling from a very long tshuva in the Yabi Omer from Rabbi Ovadia, Chacham Ovadia. And this is what this Sephardi rabbi that I quoted to you before was quoting from, that he posted on social media. The Sephardi rabbi was a little bit too liberal because Rav Ovadia is not giving you a carte blanche to not tithe, but you'll see what he says. I underlined some of the relevant portions. He says, Va'od, Shekan mimarchim al dat lahotziim lachutz la'aretz, v'dami lama shekasav hagon Rav David mikarlin b'sheilas David, v'nir li she'af al pi she'in hefker poter, ela keshehifker koidem gemar melacha, mikol makam im gomram al manas lahafkirim, afil hifkirim achar miruach, peturim min haTorah ayin sham, bu'adin kan shepeturim. He wants to make a similar argument, not citing the Maharsham, but citing the Karliner Rav, who says that we know that if you make your produce hefker, it's exempt from Trumas and Maisus. It's not Tevel anymore, it's hefker. What happens if I do Miruach HaKri, and then after the Miruach HaKri I make it hefker? Sorry, it became Tevel first. That doesn't work. But what if, at the moment when I was doing the Miruach, when I was making the stockpile, I had in mind that I was going to make it hefker? Then the Karliner Rav says, that's fine, then it'll also be pater. Because Tevel never sets in, since your intent at the time when you were making that pile was to never make it subject to Trumas and Maisros. And he says the same argument can be made over here. Skip down to this little, about 10 lines that are underlined. V'chein kasav b'shaylos utshuvas cheshav ha'efod kechol ha'amar liptur. That after quoting this whole Rambam and citing the Chazon Ish and the Rav Ovadia is somewhat critical of the Chazon Ish for not really saying that there are people who are mekel, he says v'kasav shekeven shehaminag behalachos hatluyos baretz likvoa halacha keharambam. The Sefer Cheshav Ha'efod writes that when it comes to halachos of Eretz Yisrael, agricultural law pertaining to the land of Israel, we are koveya the halacha like the Rambam. Lachein peros Eretz Yisrael sheyatzu l'chutz la'aretz yesh l'potra mitrumas u'maisros. And therefore, he says categorically, produce that's exported should be pater from trumas and maisros. Uma gam shehamishna l'melech lo ra divrei habach shekosav shein l'chalek bozeh. And the Mishnah Melech never saw the words of the Bach to know that the Bach had a totally different reading of the Rambam. V'siyem achagon mitchabin omerlo sha'af shegam haminchas chinoch hiskim midinafshi ladas habach u'delok ha'mishnah l'melech. The Chabiner Rav said, yes, you're right. We've got the Bach, we've got the minchas chinuch who are so mekel, but mikol malkom l'maisa yesh lahachmir she'ke'hamishnah l'melech. Sheken hichriu hachronim shel zmanenu be'eretz Yisrael v'sheken haminag ayin sham. But the Chabiner said, but you know what? The Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael are machmir, so we shouldn't argue with them, and we should be machmir as well and require them to be tithed, even the exported produce. V'nire sheniskavin l'divrei ha'chazon ish hanal. And what the Chabiner was referring to was the Chazon Ish. Aval kasavnu she'ein dvarav muchrachim klal. But we are of the opinion, read the Sefer Cheshav Ha'efod says, you don't necessarily have to be somech on the Chazon Ish, or use the Chazon Ish as your criterion. V'gam ein minhag zeh pashat b'chutz la'aretz klal. And furthermore, it's not so pashat that there's already an established minhag to tithe exported produce. V'yoser hayalo lahayir shahami'iri sphere le'keharayvich al koponim chayvim midrabanan. And says Rav Ovadia, it would have been a stronger argument not to say that because of the minhag we should be machmir, but rather because the Meiri sides with the Ravid. So you have a bunch of Rishonim who are against the Rambam. That's the reason why you should be machmir. V'chein ha'el yarabah heir shal shekein pirish Rabbeinu Yonah v'hakolbo v'tama al shulchan aruch shepasach ha'Rambam. And also the El Yarabah is surprised at the Shulchan Aruch for Paskinim like the Rambam when you have so many Rishonim that go like the Ravid. Umikol makom lo kashamidi demoran azil basar harambam shuhu mara da'asra. But that's not a kasha on the Shulchan Aruch, because the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, Paskins says when it comes to Eretz Yisrael halacha, we paskin always like the Rambam, who's the mara da'asra of Eretz Yisrael. U'chemosh shekasav moran hachida b'machazik bracha shahadavar yadua shebe'eretz Yisrael u'v'mitzrayim v'teiman kiblu es harambam l'rav aleihem. As it is well known, says the Chida, Rav Azulai of the 18th century, that anyone who lived in Eretz Yisrael and in Egypt accepted the psakim of the Rambam as their posek. V'chol ha'am yelchu la'ora, al piv yachanu v'al piv yisau, v'achari dvarav lo yishanu. Using poetic language, say they never deviate from the psak of the Rambam. V'lachein moran v'chachmei doro agidei b'horoas harambam ayin sham. And therefore everyone follows the Rambam if you're in Eretz Yisrael. V'arotza lismach al moran livtor legamrei. Uchamoshe pirish habach b'kavonas maran v'chein das ma'ari korkus v'adai sheyesh lo al ma sheyismoch. Concludes Rabbi Ovadia that if a person wishes to be mekel and not tithe exported produce from Eretz Yisrael, you want to, in New York or Toronto, wherever you are, you decide you want to be mekel, you have al meish al mi lismoch. Yesh al mi lismoch is not an out and out heter, but it's better if you tithe. But if you insist on being lenient, yesh al mi lismoch. If it's a shas hadechak, certainly yesh al mi lismoch. Now, last thing I want to see with you. We're not going to have time to go through all of this, but that was really a very, very powerful section in Rabbi Ovadia. He goes through the whole idea of svek steka, but since we're out of time, let me just tell you what Rav Rimon writes in Practical Halacha. Go to the last page on page 6. As mentioned above, most Rishonim and Achronim hold that one should take Trumas and Maasros, but without a bracha, because they're exported produce. Nevertheless, the Aser Ta'aser, Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, and Rav Ovadia Yosef all suggest that leniency has support. Even those who are stringent can suffice with the Chazon Ish's abridged wording of the separation, meaning make a photocopy of the wording and place a coin next to it, upon which Meiser Sheni and Neta Ravai will be Mecholal, will be redeemed. $1 Canadian coin will suffice for 28 times of tithing. In other words, you can designate a loonie and say, this is my Meiser coin, and I want the Kedusha of Meiser Sheni to be chal on this coin. Take a little more than 1/100th of the produce and say, I hereby declare that these are Trumas and Maasros according to the Trumas and Maasros wording in my possession, and then place this 1/100th in a bag, and then and once it's sealed in a bag, you can put it just in the regular garbage. Because you're treating it with respect by wrapping it. Now, if you want to know the process of tithing, you take a look, the OU, and I believe the COR has it on their website as well. You can just print it out and say, without going through everything, I'm just taking one little small piece, like I have red peppers from Eretz Yisrael. I'm taking 1/100th of the total volume of the peiros, of the peppers from Eretz Yisrael, and I'm putting it in a bag, and I say whatever Kedusha is supposed to be transferred onto the coin should be transferred. And then this is Trumas and Maasros, according to the text that's in this website. Shalom al Yisrael, eat it to your heart's content.
And the coin?
The coin you keep. The coin you keep it, you can use it up to 28 times, and then you have to sort of keep it in a special place. You can't use it to spend it on anything else.
You give it to stock up, or you do it then?
No, you just keep it in your drawer.
That's the one you drop in Yam HaMelech, or?
I think at some point, you know, if a person is going to take care of your effects, you have to ask a shayla as far as what to do with it, but it could be that it needs to be destroyed. Yeah. Bottom line is, and then, you know, the larger article, which I'm going to post later this week, the larger article of Rav Rimon says, okay, you could say, Lama li kol hatzara hazos. What do I need what do I need this headache for? So Rav Rimon says two things. Number one, what, you want to be a BDSer? Come on. Don't we have an obligation to at least support the agriculture in Eretz Yisrael, the economics in Eretz Yisrael? But then there's a more compelling, there's a ruchnius argument. which is that when you ingest produce of Eretz Yisrael, it's mamish, you're partaking of the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael in Chutz La'aretz. So why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? What, for your Shabbos table, we get the finest food, and we feel that we want to elevate the food and make our Shabbos table a holy table. What holier thing can you do to elevate your dining room table than to place the produce of Eretz Yisrael on your table? So why wouldn't you want to do that? And by the way, many times you'll find the sign in Sobeys that the Trumas and Maestros have been taken.
Or it has not been taken.
Or it has not been taken. And then if it says it has not been taken, so just cut off a half of an orange from a dozen oranges, or a quarter of an orange, whatever it is, 100th, right? And just say, this is Trumas and Maestros, here's my coin, put it in a bag, throw it away, and you're done. It took you, a whole 30 seconds? And now you can partake of Kedusha Sa'aretz, and you can support the economy in Eretz Yisrael, the farming, which we know from speaking to enough farmers in Eretz Yisrael is suffering. So that's the argument. Now, I was just in L.A., and I was davening in a shul. So after I so passionately became this righteous convert, right, who learned about these halachos, the rabbi coincidentally got up to speak, and he was talking about how sometimes you can't tell, just by looking at something, qualitatively, if there's any difference between one tomato and another tomato. And he said, I went to the supermarket, and I asked the guy, is this grown in Israel? Because it doesn't have a label on it. And I know some grow in Israel, some don't grow in Israel. And he said, what's the difference? They all taste the same. So, of course, he said, listen, I don't believe in BDS, but between you and me, I'm not going to buy produce from Eretz Yisrael because of Trumas and Maestros. So, of course, I was, after I learned, that's exactly how I used to think. So I very politely, he's an old friend of mine, I very politely went over to him after davening. I says, you may want to rethink this whole thing. I said, because, the Rambam says that even lechatchila, produce that's exported to Chutz La'aretz is patur from Trumas and Maestros. And he says, well, I'm sure there's a Derabanan there. And I said, well, go through the Sugya. And why would you want to be on the side of the BDSers, at the end of the day? But anyway, there you have it. And I really do feel that's mitzvah lefarsing. It is a mitzvah to publicize this issue, because this is how we participate in the economy of Eretz Yisrael. This is how we participate in Kedusha Sa'aretz. Even though we're eating produce from Mexico and from South America, we should be partaking of the produce of Eretz Yisrael.